How we doing?
Good. Happy
Good.
Friday.
Happy Friday indeed. Another episode of Brand is Everything. I have a really good one for you guys this week. I think you're going to be pretty pumped on it. This is from one of our favorite branding agencies of all time, Koto. Shout out to the brand goats. We love them so much. This is one that I have found to be quite recent, and it is the Norton Museum of Art. So the Norton is a museum in Florida. It was started in 1941. Koto got this project and wanted to do a brand update, brand refresh, rebrand, and something that I have found to be really interesting about this was the word mark that they built here. One of the things that they found was this word mark on an 80-year-old masthead. So they found this in their archives and said, that's some beautiful typography. Why don't we just use that? One of the things that they did to update it and modernize it was they took the 40-degree angle of that N and they applied it to that diagonal orientation to some of the other letters, that tilt of the O and the leg of the R. And then something that was really interesting is that one of the creative directors that worked on this talked about how they applied that then through the entire visual identity. So it became this visual device that could show up in holding shapes, in text paths, in layout grids. And I was looking at this GIF over here and I was like, oh yeah, the way that they actually build the composition of these follows that same diagonal orientation, which is really cool. I'm curious what you guys think just on first view.
No, it's beautiful. Shout out to our friends at Koto. I've had the pleasure of working with Koto. They are masters of branding. What strikes me about this is art is hard to brand because art is so visual. Art is already there. So they need to prop up the art and they can't overshine it. And where did they look to get their inspiration? Not some mood boards, right? They looked at the world. They looked at their history. They went to the archives. And it's a moment where the archaeology is better than invention and exploration and design. So there's something I think really neat and right about them going to their archives and diving into the history and bringing it back to create a mark that is uniquely them with historical context. And what you end up getting is something that only they can do.
Talk about an asset bank, right? An art gallery that has 80 years worth of art that you can use. So it's like you were saying, how do you build the branding around that, but then also be able to showcase the actual art itself? I think one of the other things that was really interesting that the creative director said on this was about how that diagonality taken from the N and the O is framed as this symbol of going against the grain thinking and having different perspectives coming together. So it's really cool that this historic institution also has that looking forward mentality to it.
Yeah, we talk a lot about in branding, it's searching for the system, it's exploring, looking for an aesthetic, a look and feel, and a strategy, and all the work that goes into that, which is a lot of work and it's also a skill. But it's not lost on me as you talk that Kodo's job was editing instead of creating. They simplified, similar to Redheads, that trend of
Hmm.
looking in the past and pulling out the future of the brand from the past.
This is their secondary iconography, the Diana seal, it's called. And you can see in this GIF all of these historic ways that this had previously been used by the museum. It was actually their 50th anniversary mark. And obviously, Koto redrew it for clarity's sake, so it could scale down on screens and whatnot. But this kind of iconography is not what you really think of when you think of modern design, right? That would be a super simplified, thick icon that you had probably seen before. But again, because this existed from the history of this company, of this brand, They said, why are we going to reinvent the wheel when they've already built something beautiful, and honoring the heritage of what's been built already.
When you're working with any kind of historical institution, it's really important to honor what's already been done. There's so much opportunity to overly modernize to the point where the history of the institution is lost. It makes me think of, similarly, as you already said, Jason, Redheads also dates back to the 40s. I believe it was 1947 when that logo started being widely circulated. And there's a real opportunity to possibly offend generations worth of people who have consumed either that product or this museum, that brand, if you deviate too far away from it. I'm wondering, from both of your perspectives, Koto found the word mark, obviously it was buried under old communication. How often do you think the best brand decisions are already sitting within the institution itself versus genuinely needing to be invented from the jump?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's almost like a treat and a treasure as a designer or a creative director to be given a specific project with a client that has history for a place like this that clearly had a lot of pride in who they were and how they've retained that over 80 plus years. It's a nod to the heritage and maintaining that pride while bringing it into modern feel.
I think it goes back to the brief. There's the idea of a tailwind and a headwind. Your tailwind is the Norton, clearly. It's a historical brand. It's been around for decades. People already have a relationship with it. Don't ignore it. I don't know what the headwind and the tension is that they were facing, but I can guess it is that their identity isn't clear and they struggle to have a voice as they adapt to different medias in different places or try to find a new audience. Now, I remember even back in ad school, I was working on Toys R Us as a spec campaign you do as a student. We got in trouble for throwing away a lot of the previous branding for Toys R Us. You have to recognize the relationship that people have with brands. And just like if a person, like you shave your mustache, you shave your head, and you show up to people who know you, they're going to be like, whoa, what did you do? And then you're wearing something completely different. Your tone of voice is different. Your personality is different. Brands are people. So they need to be treated as you earn the equity and the reputation. And if you change too drastically, you're disappointing the people who love your brand too. It's a delicate, delicate relationship.
It's a really interesting point, too, because art is such an experience. This is something that people have a very intimate relationship with. A brand can be a person in its own right. An art museum is an experience. So
Mhm.
people have a lived history going to this space, interacting with this brand in a way that only something visceral like an art museum can really deliver. So it's not only that it's a product to be consumed, but it's an experience that can, traverse generations of people. So it's a really delicate dance.
I love the idea of a brand as a person. We always talk about that. It's a living, breathing entity. It has a tone of voice. It has a way that it looks, right? It has a way that it sounds. People have, like you were saying, Lou, visceral reaction to it. What Kodo did here, it was a discovery of who they already were, right? As opposed to, we're going to reinvent ourselves and rewrite the playbook for it. There's this really interesting idea as well behind an art gallery that over time is constantly swapping out what's on the walls or what's in their gallery halls, right? The brand system that they created has enough flexibility in it, whether that's in the compositional layout or the color palette here, where it's actually really highlighting the art itself and letting those do a lot of the heavy lifting. They're literally in this gift, the central piece of these compositions, right? And I think that that has interesting tie to how art in a gallery is constantly swapped in and out. The system has to flex because the art is constantly changing.
Well, and it has to be able to traverse so many different genres too. A Matisse is going to be entirely different than a Stuart Davis, whereas the Norton also has a permanent collection of John Singer Sargent, which is some of the most fluid and I would say almost melodic artworks that you can witness. So it really has to complement a wide variety of art styles and forms.
Yeah, like, look at this here. It seems like it's a wide palette, and it is, but there's a refinement to it in that the choice of their background colors and the type colors have an aesthetic tie to the art that they're framing in each one of these posters.
It's very clean.
I want to ask you two a question going back to the rebranding of the Norton logo and specifically about the 40-degree angle device.
Mhm.
Is that the kind of thing that you think makes a brand stronger or the kind of thing that designers only like you two would really notice?
Really good question. People might not realize it outside of looking at this case study and analyzing the brand. But what I believe it does to people who don't realize it, it gives it ownability in a way that gives it a design system that is uniquely to Norton. And it allows them to create a system also that is connected in harmony with itself too. If you took that away, that would just be a normal typeface.
It's also one of those design decisions that if we weren't watching this GIF and looking at this case study and seeing how beautifully they oriented and made all of that alignment happen, it would just feel right. And you might not be able to point it out like you're saying, but there's just something about it that feels right. And I think that that's good design principle of simplification, right? It's like being a sculptor and having a block of granite and chiseling down to only its essential pieces, the beauty of great design. And not saying that this was an easy task by Koto, but in terms of how much they did to this word mark, it's not that much, right? They made a few small tweaks. It feels right when it's viewed.
Mike, do we know how the rebrand has been received? I know you said that this has been relatively recent, so we may not know the reaction quite yet, but I'm curious if there's been any insight yet.
I'm sure it's being well received.
I think so, especially since it's rooted in the museum's history already. There's a tendency within the art community to reject rebrands that completely avoid or ignore a museum's history if that history has been well received and celebrated. The Met did a rebrand in 2016 and they scrapped the interlocking M logo, which was around for like 40, 45 years, and it was not celebrated by any means, which is an interesting deviation.
Yeah, that goes back to disappointing the community with the change that they do. There was a relationship to that mark. And if you get rid of that mark, you're going to upset people.
I have a question too about that. How far back is too far back when it comes to sourcing any kind of brand inspiration from an archive? The Philadelphia Museum of Art rebranded as well really recently, and they are now called the Philadelphia Art Museum. They changed the name of the museum and they recirculated a logo from 1938. And that also really rocked the Philadelphia art community. Is there such a thing as looking too far back in the archive that you alienate the community that you have now?
I think you have to do the due diligence of your market research and knowing what your community resonates with. But in terms of inspiration, I think everything's fair game. As a designer getting a project like this, you're almost jealous of the team at Koto that got to go to this museum and dig into their archives because just imagine the amount of stuff that they saw. It was probably really hard for them because of the amount of creative that they had to view. They probably were almost overloaded with it. Maybe in this case, it was harder for them.
It's also always going to come back to the idea and the concept. And if that concept is paying homage to an older design system and bringing that back to tell the story, that could be the concept itself. But once you have a concept and an idea for the brand, then every little detail should have a reason. And I think that's why Mike and I and other people in the branding world fall in love with things like this, because if you would have told me this animation where they're going back and forth in the middle on the left, I had no idea that that was mimicking the angle. That is just an example of every little detail follows this rule and is thought about. That's everything, you know? That's brand is everything.
I was thinking of this, how Koto set this up. This is a really interesting way of
Oh,
showing
cool.
how in a wireframe, right? Just the way that they stack that type, like in that GIF that was on the upper right, again, probably would never even consider that that's somehow tied to the concept until you know that it is like that, right? That's that 40-degree angle, the type here, the type here. And also, we've been dancing around this idea too of the retainment of the history of this thing. They center and frame the actual art so well in a lot of these examples. Even if you didn't like the logo refresh, it's hard to be upset with it in a way because they're really not offending anything by being so intentional with showcasing the art itself. The branding actually becomes the framing as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah. And we can relate with the stability brand of trying to create a brand system that highlights what other people make and what we make with the tools that we create, but still having our brand prominent and ownable within highlighting those visuals. It's a challenge within itself of being the a curator of something instead of the actual thing. Cool. It's beautiful brand, Koto, always doing beautiful work.
This was beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Mike.
Hats off to Koto, and thank you guys for another episode. It's always fun having these chats. Maybe we can go and visit the Norton.
Can we?
Field
That would
trip.
be great.
Yeah, let's take the field trip.
Company field trip. Let's do it.